The backyard was loud in the way only a child's birthday party can be. Music played too loudly from a speaker that kept crackling. Balloons floated unevenly, some already half deflated under the afternoon heat. Kids ran in chaotic circles, sugar-fueled and unstoppable, their laughter blending into one constant, happy noise. And in the middle of it all, my son. 5 years old. Grinning like the world belonged to him. He was chasing bubbles, arms stretched wide, laughing that same laugh I'd heard 1,000 times before, the kind that made everything else feel worth it. My wife stood a few feet away, watching him. Smiling. Relaxed. Comfortable. Like this was the life we had built together, and everything was exactly as it should be. Family surrounded us. Friends. Plates clinking. Drinks passing from hand to hand. It was perfect. That's why I didn't see it coming. My brother stepped forward, holding a drink, already laughing at something no one else had heard yet. He looked at my son, then back at me. And then he said it. Funny how he acts just like me. There was a beat, just a split second, and then the laughter exploded. Loud. Easy. Natural. Someone slapped him on the back. Another person added, "Yeah, I was just thinking that." More laughter. My wife laughed too. But I didn't. I couldn't. Because in that moment, something inside me didn't move. It froze. The sound around me, voices, music, laughter, it all started to blur. Like someone had slowly turned the volume down on the world. I watched my son again. Still laughing. Still running. Still, him. And then I looked back at my brother. He was still smiling. Still joking. Like he hadn't just said something that felt wrong. Not offensive. Not even serious. Just too accurate. Too specific. Too familiar. And that's when it hit me. Not like a realization. More like something that had already been there, finally stepping into the light. A quiet thought. One I had buried so deeply, I didn't even realize I'd. Act 2, the first seed of doubt. Scene 2, subtle differences. At first, I told myself I was overthinking it. That's what normal people do, right? They don't let a joke spiral into something bigger. But once the thought exists, it doesn't leave. It waits. And then it starts pointing things out. Small things. Things that never mattered before. Like his smile. I had always thought it was just his. A kid's smile. Wide, uneven, still growing into itself. But now I noticed the way it curved more on one side. The way his upper lip lifted slightly higher when he laughed. The way his teeth showed, not fully, not evenly. I'd seen that smile before. Just not on him. I looked across the yard. At my brother. Same tilt. Same asymmetry. Same expression. I felt something tighten in my chest. So I looked away. Focused on something else. But it didn't stop. It never does once it starts. Later, my son ran up to grab a slice of cake. He laughed again. Louder this time, and clapped his hands in that quick, repeated rhythm he always did when he got excited. Clap. Clap, clap. Clap. I froze. Because I knew that pattern. I'd seen it for years. At family gatherings. At jokes. At celebrations. Not from him. From my brother. Even the way he tilted his head when someone called his name. Even the way his eyes narrowed slightly when he smiled. It wasn't exact. But it was close. Too close. And suddenly, it felt like I wasn't just noticing things. I was recognizing them. Scene 3, self-denial loop. No, I told myself. Quietly. Firmly. No, that's not what this is. I forced a breath. Forced my shoulders to relax. Forced myself to act normal. Because there were explanations. Of course there were. There always are. Genetics are unpredictable. Kids don't always look like their parents. Everyone knows that. Sometimes they resemble uncles, grandparents, distant relatives. That's normal. Completely normal. And kids copy behavior. They imitate whoever they spend time with. And my brother was around a lot. Birthdays, holidays, random visits. Of course, my son would pick things up from him. That didn't mean anything. It couldn't. I repeated it again. That doesn't mean anything. And for a moment, it worked. I smiled when I needed to. Laughed when someone spoke to me. Picked up plates. Poured drinks. Played the role I was supposed to play. Husband. Father. Brother. Everything was still in place. Everything still made sense. Except, it didn't feel the same anymore. Because now, every time I looked at my son, I wasn't just seeing him. I was comparing, measuring, questioning. And I hated that. I hated myself for even thinking it. But the thought didn't care. It had already settled in. Scene 4, first flashback trigger. The memory came out of nowhere. Sharp. Uninvited. Like it had been waiting for permission. My wife and my brother, standing in the kitchen. Laughing. Not loud. Not the kind of laughter meant for everyone. Quieter. Contained. Like they were sharing something specific. Something private. I remembered walking in. The way their conversation stopped. Not abruptly. But just enough. Just enough to notice. At the time, I didn't question it. Why would I? They were family. Close. Comfortable. That's what I told myself. That's what I believed. But now, that same moment replayed differently. Slower. Clearer. Suspicious. Then another memory. Late night conversations. Voices low. Phone screens lighting up in the dark. I had assumed it was nothing. Just casual talk. Just familiarity. Just normal. I swallowed. Hard. Because now, every normal moment didn't feel normal anymore. It felt like something I had missed. Something I had ignored. Something I had chosen not to see. And the question hit me harder than anything else so far. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just quiet. Sharp. Unavoidable. Why didn't it bother me back then? Act 3, Suspicion takes root. Scene 5, Brother's increasing presence. At first, it still felt normal. That's the dangerous part. Nothing ever starts as a problem. It starts as something explainable. Something reasonable. Something you can laugh off if anyone questions it. My brother just cares, I told myself. And it was true, on the surface. He started coming around more often. Not enough to raise alarms. Just enough to become expected. A random Tuesday evening. A Saturday morning just passing by. A quick stop after work. At some point, I stopped asking why he was there. Because there was always a reason ready before the question could even fully form. I was in the area. I missed the little man. I brought snacks. Always harmless. Always easy. And my son, he adored him. That part made everything harder. Because how do you question someone your child runs toward? How do you challenge a man who gets greeted with laughter and open arms? Still, something shifted. It wasn't just the frequency. It was the way he acted. The way he spoke to my son, not like an uncle trying to entertain him, but like someone used to being listened to. Hey, don't do that. Come here. Not playful. Direct. Instinctive. Natural. Like authority wasn't something he was borrowing, but something he already owned. I noticed it one evening when my son ignored me. Completely. Didn't even look up. But when my brother called his name. Immediate response. No hesitation. No second call. Just obedience. That was the first moment something inside me tightened. Not enough to react, but enough to remember. Scene 6, Wife's defensive behavior. I didn't confront her right away. I tested the waters first. Carefully. Casually. The kind of questions that shouldn't mean anything. Has he been coming around more lately? Simple. Neutral. Safe. She didn't even hesitate. You're overthinking. Too fast. Too sharp. Like she had been waiting for the question. I smiled it off. Tried again later. You don't think he's a bit too involved? That one landed differently. Her body changed before her face did. A slight pause. Then. That's your brother. Not reassurance. Correction. Like I had stepped out of line just by asking. I felt it then, that subtle shift in energy. The conversation wasn't open anymore. It was being managed. Every time I brought him up after that, the pattern repeated. Deflect. Dismiss. Redirect. You're making something out of nothing. You're being weird. Why are you acting like this? Each response chipped away at my confidence just enough to make me question myself. Not completely. Just enough. And that's all it takes. Because doubt doesn't need to win. It just needs to exist. Scene 7, Internal psychological conflict. I stopped asking questions out loud. But inside, they got louder. Every interaction became something to analyze. Every glance. Every tone. Every moment that didn't feel right. But here's the problem with suspicion. It splits you in half. One side of me needed this to be nothing. Needed it to be coincidence. Needed it to be my imagination running wild. Because the alternative? The alternative would destroy everything. But the other side. The quieter side. The one that didn't speak in panic but in cold observation. It started connecting things. Patterns I had ignored. Moments I had dismissed. And now I was stuck in between. Pride versus fear. Because if I was wrong, I would look insane. Paranoid. Insecure. The kind of man who destroys his own family over nothing. But if I was right, then I had already lost something I didn't even know how to name. And that thought. That possibility. It froze me. I didn't confront. I didn't accuse. I didn't investigate further. I just watched. And waited. And slowly became a stranger inside my own life. Scene 8, second flashback sequence. Once the doubt settles in, your memory stops being a record. And starts becoming evidence. Things I hadn't thought about in years came back. Clearer than they should have been. Sharper. More intentional. Missed calls. At the time, they meant nothing. Now, they felt deliberate. Times I tried reaching her and couldn't. Her phone off. Or silent. Or left in another room. I remembered one night specifically. I had called 3 times. No answer. When she finally picked up, her voice was calm. Too calm. I was sleeping. But in the background, there had been movement. I ignored it then. I wanted to ignore it. And then there was him. The one moment I couldn't shake. I had asked where she was once, just casually. And he answered. Not her. Him. She's with me. We stepped out for something. At the time, it sounded harmless. Convenient, even. Now it sounded like something else entirely. Like a detail I wasn't supposed to question. Like a moment I had been guided past. And suddenly, it wasn't one memory anymore. It was a chain. A pattern. A structure that had always been there. Hidden in plain sight. Cliffhanger. The thought didn't come in loudly. It didn't crash into my mind. It slid in quietly. Carefully. Like it had always been waiting for the right moment. What if all the pieces were always there? And then, the part one couldn't escape. And I just refused to see them? Act 4, the pattern break. Scene 9, the school assignment. It started with something innocent. That's how these things always begin. A school project. Bright paper. Excited voice. Dad. We have to do a family tree. He ran toward me, holding the paper like it was the most important thing in the world. And to him, it was. Names. Photos. Where we come from. Simple. Harmless. Normal. Until he said the next part. And we might do a DNA test too. Everything inside me stopped. Not slowed. Not hesitated. Stopped. Like my body understood something my mind hadn't fully processed yet. I forced a smile. That sounds interesting. But my chest tightened in a way I couldn't control. Because suddenly, this wasn't just a project. It was a risk. A quiet, unintentional threat. Disguised as homework. Scene 10, immediate resistance. I tried to shut it down immediately. Gently. Without raising suspicion. Maybe we can just do the family tree part, I suggested. No need for all the extra stuff. He frowned. Confused. But the teacher said. I know what the teacher said, I cut in, too quickly. Too firmly. He went quiet. And I felt it instantly. That shift. The moment I became the problem instead of the solution. I softened my tone. We'll figure it out, okay? But inside, there was no figuring it out. There was only avoidance. Delay. Control. Because I didn't want answers. Not like that. Not by accident. Not in a way I couldn't prepare for. Scene 11, tension spike. I should have known it wouldn't stay contained. Nothing ever does. She brought it up that night. Casually. Too casually. He told me about the project, she said. I nodded. Kept my eyes on something else. It's a good idea, she continued. We should do it properly. There was weight behind that word. Properly. I shrugged. We can keep it simple. Silence. Then. No, she said. Flat. Certain. We're doing the full thing. Something in my chest tightened again. This wasn't a suggestion. It was a decision. And then. He spoke. From the other side of the room. I think it's a great idea. My brother. Of course. I turned to look at him. And for a second. Just a second. Something passed between them. Too fast to define. Too subtle to prove. But too real to ignore. Agreement. Comfort. Confidence. Like this situation didn't worry them. Like it didn't threaten anything. Like there was nothing to fear. And that's when it hit me. Not as a thought, but as a feeling. Cold. Heavy. Unavoidable. Suspense beat. Why were they both so comfortable? With something I feared? The envelope trembled in my hands, its weight heavier than I imagined. My fingers shook, not from the cold, but from a dread that rooted itself in my chest. Each breath felt like a wire tightening around my ribs. "Don't do this," a voice whispered inside me. But my hands betrayed me. I opened the kit, the sterile smell of plastic and paper filling my nostrils. I swabbed my son's cheek, my hands quivering so violently that I had to pause. He smiled up at me, innocent, oblivious, trusting. My chest twisted. How could the same child, the one I held every night, the one whose laughter echoed through these walls, belong to someone else? I sealed the sample. My heart pounded as I sent it off, like dropping a bomb into a mailbox and waiting for the inevitable explosion. Scene 13, waiting period, high suspense zone. Days blurred into nights. Sleep became a memory, stolen and fleeting. My mind replayed every interaction, every subtle glance, every joke, every touch between my wife and my brother. I watched them. Everywhere. My son's laughter felt like it mocked me. My brother's presence lingered too long, too close, and I noticed things I had ignored before, the way he adjusted the blanket on my son's legs, the way his hand brushed my wife's during a quiet conversation. Innocent? Maybe. Or maybe rehearsed. I spiraled into obsession. Notes scribbled in the margins of my calendar. Photos taken discreetly. Every interaction catalogued, analyzed, dissected. I couldn't trust silence anymore, it screamed secrets louder than any argument ever could. And then came the moment I realized something terrifying: they weren't afraid. Scene 14, behavioral red flags intensify. The house felt different. Every room a stage. My brother moved like he owned it. Not with arrogance, but with the casual confidence of someone who already knew the truth. My wife avoided my eyes. Conversations ended abruptly, questions left unanswered. Even the air seemed to hold its breath when they were together. I sat on the couch one night, watching my son stack blocks, and I noticed the way my brother laughed with him. Not just playfully, like a father would. My stomach turned. Silence grew heavier than arguments. It settled over us, suffocating, telling me more than words ever could. And then it hit me: they weren't afraid. Not of me. Not of the truth. ACT 6, The Reveal, 9,500 to 11,000 words. Scene 15, results arrive. The envelope came without fanfare. A plain white rectangle. No warning. No preamble. My hands trembled again, but this time from a different fear, a premonition that I had already known deep down. I stared at it. Every second stretched like hours. I wanted to leave it unopened, to bury the truth in my ignorance. But my curiosity, or maybe my pride, overpowered me. I tore it open slowly, as if each movement could change the outcome. Scene 16, the truth. The numbers didn't lie. They never lie. My son was not mine. The biological father was my brother. The world tilted. My vision blurred. I stared at the document, shaking, unable to move. The room felt smaller, the walls pressing in. Every memory I had cherished, every smile, every bedtime story, every "I love you," felt like a cruel trick. It wasn't just betrayal. It was a complete rewriting of reality. Scene 17, emotional collapse. I expected rage. Shouting. Crashing objects. But nothing came. Silence. A deep, hollow silence that swallowed me whole. I sat down, my mind separating from my body. Dissociation. I was there, but not really. Watching, observing, but unable to intervene. Everything I built wasn't real. Every moment of trust, every claim of family, every carefully curated life, it was a lie. And in that moment, I realized confrontation wasn't immediate. Not yet. Because the hardest part wasn't anger, it was the quiet knowledge that they expected me to. Decision not to react. I didn't scream. That's the part people don't understand. When your entire reality collapses in a single moment, you expect rage. You expect something loud, violent, immediate. But what I felt instead was silence. Not outside. Inside. Like someone had pulled the plug on every emotion at once. The result sat on the table in front of me. Cold. Clinical. Final. 0% probability. Not my son. And worse. The other name on that report was my brother's. I remember staring at it for so long that the words stopped looking like words. Just shapes. Meaningless shapes that somehow carried the weight of my entire life. I thought I would break something. Instead, I folded the paper. Carefully. Neatly. Like it was just another document. Like it didn't just destroy me. That's when it hit me. Reacting wouldn't fix anything. It wouldn't change the past. It wouldn't undo the betrayal. And it definitely wouldn't give me control. No. If anything, reacting would give them control. And for the first time since this started, I realized something dangerous. I didn't want answers anymore. I wanted power. So I made a decision. I wouldn't confront them. Not yet. I wouldn't argue. I wouldn't accuse. I wouldn't even flinch. I would watch. I would listen. And when the time came, I would choose exactly how this ended. Scene 19, reframing the past. It's funny how memory works. How the brain protects you until it can't anymore. Because once I knew the truth, everything changed. Not just the present. The past too. Moments I once ignored started replaying in perfect clarity. Like my mind had been recording everything. Waiting for permission to show me. The way my brother held him. Not like an uncle. Like something else. Too comfortable. Too natural. The way my son would run to him without hesitation. The way he laughed at his jokes harder than mine. The way my wife would go quiet whenever I asked simple questions. I used to call it overthinking. Now I called it blindness. Because the signs weren't subtle. They were just inconvenient. And I didn't want to see them. There was one memory I couldn't shake. A random afternoon. Nothing special. My brother was over, sitting on the floor, playing with him. I remember walking in and hearing him say, "Come to Daddy." At the time, we all laughed. He quickly corrected himself. "Uncle, I meant uncle." Everyone brushed it off. Even me. But now that moment played in my head like a confession. Not a mistake. A slip. The truth leaking out. And the worst part? They didn't just betray me once. They lived with it. Every day. Every smile. Every family dinner. Every photo. All of it. Built on a lie I helped maintain. I started seeing it everywhere. The glances. The tension. The unspoken understanding between them. Like they were sharing a secret in a room where I was the only one who didn't know it. Until now. Now I knew everything. And somehow, that made me more dangerous than emotional. Because clarity doesn't just hurt. It sharpens you. Scene 20, conflict about the child. The hardest part wasn't them. It wasn't the betrayal. It wasn't even the humiliation. It was him. Because no test could rewrite 5 years. No piece of paper could erase the first time he called me dad. The nights I stayed awake when he was sick. The way he reached for my hand when he was scared. So I sat there. Alone. Asking myself a question I never thought I'd have to answer. Is he still my son? Biology said no. Reality was more complicated. I tried to look at it logically. He wasn't mine. Not by blood. Not by truth. But love doesn't follow logic. That was the problem. Because when I closed my eyes, I didn't see a lie. I saw him. Laughing. Running. Calling me. Trusting me. Completely. And that's what broke me. Not the betrayal. The innocence. Because he didn't choose this. He didn't lie. He didn't cheat. He didn't destroy anything. We did. And now I had to decide. Was I going to punish him for a truth he didn't create? Or was I strong enough to separate love from biology? I wish I could say I had the answer right away. I didn't. Some days, I felt nothing. Other days, I felt everything. But one thing became clear. Whatever happened next, it couldn't be reckless. Because this wasn't just about me anymore. It was about him too. And that meant I had to be careful. Precise. Controlled. Scene 21, Planning the Gathering. If you want the truth to hurt, you don't reveal it in private. You reveal it where it can't be denied. Where it can't be twisted. Where there are witnesses. That's when it becomes real. So I planned something simple. A family gathering. Nothing unusual. Nothing suspicious. The kind of event we'd had dozens of times before. Birthdays. Celebrations. Excuses to pretend everything was perfect. I picked the date. Sent the invites. Watched the responses come in. My wife replied first. Sounds good, Redheart. My brother followed. Wouldn't miss it. Of course you wouldn't. Why would you? You both thought you were safe. That's what made it perfect. I kept everything normal. Routine. Predictable. Smiled when I needed to. Talked when I had to. Played my role so well. Even I almost believed it. But behind that calm, everything was set. Because this wasn't just a confrontation. It was a stage. And they were walking into it willingly. No suspicion. No preparation. No escape. And as I looked at the final confirmation message, I leaned back in my chair and whispered something I didn't even recognize as my own voice. If they wanted to pretend. I paused. A small smile forming for the first time since everything fell apart. I'd let them. One last time. Performing Arts Act 8, The Setup. 13,000 to 14,500 words range condensed but expandable. Scene 22, The Gathering. The house looked exactly the same. That was the unsettling part. Same decorations. Same familiar chaos of voices overlapping each other. If you walked in without knowing anything, you'd think it was just another happy family moment. And that's exactly what they thought it was. My wife moved through the room effortlessly. Smiling. Greeting people. Playing her role perfectly. If guilt existed, she hid it well. My brother showed up 10 minutes late. Confident as always. Relaxed. Like he belonged. Like nothing in the world could touch him. He walked in, greeted everyone. And then his eyes landed on me. For a split second. Something shifted. Not fear. Not panic. Just awareness. Like he was checking. Measuring. Trying to read something. I gave him nothing. Just a calm nod. Neutral. Controlled. And just like that, the moment passed. The performance continued. Scene 23, character positioning. Everyone took their places without realizing it. Like pieces on a board. My wife stayed close to the center. Talking. Laughing. Comfortable. Too comfortable. My brother drifted between groups. Engaging. Joking. Playing the role he'd perfected over years. And me? I stayed quiet. Observing. Positioning myself where I could see everything. Every interaction. Every glance. Every subtle movement they thought no one noticed. But I noticed. Now I noticed everything. The way she avoided standing too close to him for too long. The way he compensated by being overly casual. The way they never looked at each other directly. Unless they thought no one was watching. It was almost impressive. The discipline. The coordination. The years of practice it must have taken to hide something like this. But even the best performances have cracks. And tonight, I wasn't just watching for them. I was waiting for the right moment to break them open. Scene 24, psychological pressure build. Time moved slowly. Painfully slowly. Every second stretched longer than it should have. But that was part of it. Pressure isn't built in explosions. It's built in silence. In anticipation. In the space between. What is, and what's about to happen? I made eye contact with my brother at exactly the wrong times. Held it just a second too long. Not enough to alarm him. Just enough to unsettle him. I saw it. That slight hesitation. That flicker of uncertainty. Good. Then I did the same with my wife. A look that lingered. A calm that didn't match the moment. She noticed too. Of course she did. Because guilt doesn't need proof. It reacts to presence alone. The room stayed loud. Full of life. But underneath it, something was shifting. Something only three of us could feel. And they didn't even know why yet. That was the beauty of it. Because while they were trying to figure out what was wrong, I already knew how this ended. I glanced around the room one more time. At the people laughing. Talking. Completely unaware that they were standing inside a moment that would change everything. Then I looked back at them. At both of them. And for the first time since this started, I felt something again. Not anger. Not sadness. Something colder. Something sharper. Control. And as I stepped forward slightly, closing the distance, preparing for what came next, one thought echoed in my mind. They had no idea what was coming. The speech. The glass in my hand felt heavier than it should have. Maybe it was the tension. Maybe it was everything I knew that they didn't. The room was warm. Loud. Alive. Laughter bounced off the walls. Plates clinked. Someone in the corner was arguing about football. My son was weaving between chairs, chasing a balloon that kept slipping from his fingers. Normal. Painfully normal. I stood slowly, raising the glass just enough to catch attention, not demand it. I just want to say something. It wasn't loud. But it didn't need to be. Voices softened. Conversations paused. Chairs shifted slightly as bodies turned toward me. My wife looked up first. Smiling. Relaxed. Comfortable. My brother leaned back in his chair, one arm resting casually like he owned the room. Like he always did. I smiled too. That same calm smile I'd been wearing all evening, the one that didn't quite reach my eyes. 5 years ago, I became a father. A few soft ahs rippled through the room. I nodded slowly, letting the moment breathe. And I remember thinking, nothing in my life had ever felt more real than that. My voice didn't shake. That surprised me. I remember holding him for the first time, counting his fingers, his toes. I chuckled lightly, making sure everything was perfect. A few people laughed quietly. Relatable. Safe. Controlled. I remember promising myself something that day. I paused. Not because I forgot. Because timing was everything. That no matter what happened, I would always protect him. My wife's smile deepened. She reached for her drink. Still calm. Still unaware. Scene 26, tone shift. And for 5 years. I exhaled slowly. I believed I was keeping that promise. Something changed. Not in the room yet. But in the air. Subtle. Like pressure before a storm. I believed I knew my family. My eyes moved slowly, deliberately. From my wife. To my brother. Then back to the crowd. I believed I understood the people closest to me. The smile faded. Not abruptly. Gradually. Like a light dimming. And I believed. I swallowed. That honesty was something we all shared. A chair creaked somewhere behind me. No one laughed this time. Good. They were starting to feel it. I was wrong. That landed. You could hear it. My wife's expression tightened just slightly. Confusion. Not fear. Not yet. My brother shifted in his seat. Still relaxed, but less certain. I let the silence stretch. Uncomfortable now. Heavy. Intentional. Because sometimes. I continued, quieter now. The people you trust the most are the ones hiding the most from you. Scene 27, the reveal. I reached into my jacket. Slow. Deliberate. Every movement now, amplified. Eyes followed. Curiosity turning into unease. I pulled out the envelope. Plain. Unremarkable. But it may as well have been a weapon. I didn't want to do this, I said softly. And that part was true. I fought it. I ignored it. I told myself I was crazy. My eyes met hers. And I trusted you. Her face changed. Not dramatically. But enough. The smile was gone. Replaced with something fragile. Something calculating. What's going on? She asked, her voice light but strained. I didn't answer her. Not yet. Instead, I turned slightly toward him. My brother. This started as a joke, didn't it? A flicker crossed his face. Fast. But I caught it. What are you talking about? He said, chuckling lightly. Too lightly. I mean, you've always joked, right? I tilted my head. About how he acts like you. A few people glanced between us now. The room was no longer comfortable. It was watching. Waiting. I guess, I continued, some jokes aren't really jokes. My fingers slid the paper out of the envelope. The sound alone was enough to silence the room completely. Paper against paper. Truth being unsheathed. I took a test. Now. Silence. Not quiet. Silence. The kind that presses against your ears. My wife stood up slightly. What test? There it was. The crack. I looked at her. Really looked at. Horror. And for the first time in a long time. I didn't see the woman I loved. I took a DNA test. Gasps. Whispers. Shock moving like a wave through the room. No, she started. But I kept going. Because if I stopped now, I might not start again. And the results came back. I held up the paper. Steady. Unshaking. And they said. I paused. Let it hang. Let it hurt. He's not my son. Scene 28, Emotional Fallout. It didn't explode immediately. That's what people get wrong about moments like this. There's no instant chaos. First, there's impact. Pure, disorienting impact. My wife froze. Completely. Like her body hadn't caught up to reality yet. My brother blinked. Once. Twice. Then laughed. Actually laughed. Okay, this isn't funny, he said, shaking his head. Denial. Right on cue. This isn't a joke, I replied. My voice was flat now. Empty. I ran it twice. That hit harder. Because now it wasn't doubt. It was certainty. My wife stepped forward. Her voice broke. You're lying. Not you're wrong. Not there's a mistake. Lying. Interesting. I wish I was. That's when the room broke. Voices erupted. What is he saying? This can't be real. Wait, wait, wait. Someone pulled their chair back loudly. Another person stood up. My brother's expression shifted again. Denial, slipping into anger. You're seriously doing this right now, he snapped. Doing what? I asked calmly. Embarrassing yourself? Embarrassing us? Us. I almost smiled. You think this is about embarrassment? I took a step closer. Tell them. His jaw tightened. Tell them I'm wrong. Silence. He didn't speak. Didn't move. Didn't deny it. That was enough. My wife grabbed his arm. Say something. Panic now. Real panic. This is insane, he's twisting things, she rushed. Then explain it, I cut in. Sharp. Controlled. How does a DNA test get twisted? She opened her mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. Nothing came out. And that was the loudest thing in the room. The truth doesn't always need words. Sometimes, silence confirms everything. My brother exhaled hard, running a hand over his head. This isn't the place for this, he muttered. Ah. Deflection. Classic. No, I said quietly. It's exactly the place. I turned slowly. Facing everyone. Because this. I held up the paper again. Is where the lie lived. In the smiles. In the laughter. In every family gathering where I was the only one who didn't know. My wife started crying now. Not softly. Not controlled. Messy. Desperate. I was going to tell you. I laughed. A short, broken sound. When? No answer. Before or after he started calling you mummy and him uncle? That hit. Hard. My brother stepped forward now. Aggressive. Watch your mouth. I met his eyes. No fear left. Nothing left to lose. You should have thought about that 5 years ago. For a moment. I thought he might swing. But he didn't. Because deep down, he knew. This wasn't a fight he could win. Not anymore. Closing beat, high retention exit. The room was chaos now. Voices. Accusations. Shock. But it all sounded distant. Muted. Like I was already somewhere else. I looked at the boy. Still holding that balloon. Still unaware. Still innocent. And that was the only thing that hurt. Not her. Not him. Not the betrayal. Him. I placed the paper on the table. Gently. Like it deserved more respect than the people in the room. Then I picked up my keys. No shouting. No dramatic exit. Just movement. Toward the door. My wife's voice cracked behind me. Please, don't go. I stopped. Just for a second. Not enough to turn around. Just enough to speak. The truth didn't destroy my family. I opened the door. It revealed I never had one. And then I walked out.